The day of stage 6 blackouts tomorrow, that's for sure. From the smallest inconvenience, like not being able to charge your phone, to big business unable to keep up its operations effectively, the impact is broad and deep. I'm joined now by the president of the SA Chamber of Commerce and Industry, Mtho Xulu. Mtho, thank you so much for your time. Is it possible, though, to quantify how much stage 6 is costing your members? Obviously, there's really big and really small companies involved. What are they telling you about the strain that they're under?
Good evening, Sally. Thanks for having us. Look, we've all looked at how the cost of load shedding impacts the economy, and we're working on about 700 million South African rands for every stage. So if you want to understand the quantum of the impact, right? That's a day. So 700 million rands a day per stage. So at stage 6, you can imagine how much that money is. It's in at least over 4 billion. So that is the total cost of these rolling blackouts. And as the stages increase, it's another 700 million rands that you need to add on that. So we've been going on now for a couple of days on stage 6. And I hear Sikonati saying that stage 6 will become almost like the norm unless negotiations get better or if we reduce demand. So that is the cost of the entire impact on the economy. But with smaller businesses, I think it's become more than that, because some of them will not be able to recover from this rolling blackout. So the impact on the economy becomes immeasurable the longer this continues. But if you really want to have a number, it's 700 million times 6.
Yeah, so that's the cost to the economy. But as you say, I would imagine small business is more impacted than big in terms of not having a cushion, not having enough capital to run those generators indefinitely. Am I right?
Yes, and that's the problem. We as a business community believe that if we want to talk about self-generation and adding alternative energy sources, that should be done as an optional thing to assist creating energy independence for the country. But all that still depends with a reliable Eskom in the mix. And because those who are small and are still growing and still need the support of a public service like Eskom should always be able to depend on Eskom. And those are the smaller businesses who can't quickly invest in self-generation, whether it's solar or any other forms of energy. And also in the time when fuel prices are also rising, a generator is no longer just an easy option. It may be easy to buy and easy to operate, but it's probably costing you far more than it would have cost you at the time when Eskom was still reliable. So we need to get back to the cause that Eskom needs to work, and self-generation should not be an alternative. It should be adding on to create energy independence in the country, but it does not give a free pass to Eskom to do as they wish and continue to become unpredictable and unreliable, because there's a lot of South Africans, unfortunately, who do not have the resources to self-generate, and those are many of the small businesses that we have now hope that they will create all the jobs. And a majority of businesses in the country are small businesses. So we need to be very careful that we are able to maintain this public service of Eskom while we encourage self-generation. And it's not an either-or. So Eskom has to get back on a reliable path.
I want to ask for your insight, and purely because you work with business, you understand business, you probably understand wage negotiations, how very tricky they can become. When you look at the Eskom situation, we've got the unions on one side blaming the way that Eskom has behaved towards them. We've got Eskom blaming them, saying it's their stay away and their intimidation that has caused us to move to stage 6. Who do you think is most wrong, or is it impossible to say from the outside?
Well, the problem is that both sides are wrong in this case. And we said as the South African Chamber of Commerce and businesses broadly that the time we entered into a stage where Eskom workers thought their only option out was to go on an illegal strike, it just showed us that there's a deep trust deficit between the management and the workers. This is people who are supposed to be working together to turn Eskom around, part of the renewal plan since 2019 thereabout to this date. They were supposed to be pulling together during the hard lockdowns. We were promised that they were going to get out to work and really fast-track maintenance because demand was low. So what you have now, you have two sides that are both losers. And the biggest loser will be the country, because now we've entered into dangerous territory where people who work at Eskom can't find each other, and therefore creates a very dim future for any form of renewal at Eskom. So wage negotiation works when you go to a bargaining table with a sense of common respect as colleagues, that as employers, you have certain strategies that you are also committed to, but workers also believe in the vision that you are building. But what you have now is that the Eskom management seems to have a different understanding of what Eskom should be, and the workers have no belief in whatever the management is presenting. So I don't even think it's about the wage negotiation. It's about the future and the direction that the company must take. And I think Eskom and the country has now entered into a very dangerous territory of wildcat strikes, violence, and economic sabotage. And it doesn't seem like management has a great hold of it. So it's going to be very difficult for them to get it right. So it's a very dangerous time. Both parties are losers, but the biggest problem at Eskom is that management and workers don't understand Eskom as the same way, and they're not going to take. They're not following the same vision. And that's the biggest problem. Beyond wages, it can be 5%, it can be 15%. But the biggest problem is that people at the plant and people at Megawatt Park are not pulling in the same direction. And that's what we need to arrest.
And of course, let's just get back to your core business, which of course is the Chamber of Commerce and Industry. And I'm sure there are lots of discussions, a lot of strong business brains going, how can we fix this? Because business is about finding solutions, finding a solution to a problem. I want to ask you a little bit about some of the discussions that you're having within those different business meetings, and whether there's support for the smaller players. Perhaps the bigger companies in the Chamber of Commerce are saying, look, this is how we're going to help the small business people to cope. Are there discussions about working together and fixing this problem?
Yeah, well, as an overarching principle, we as a South African private sector hold the view that we are able to generate some of these solutions for the country as a private sector for public good. So if it comes to energy, we are willing to take over the responsibility of running and providing a generation, transmission, and distribution of energy. And we're just hoping that government will simply say, guys, we will focus on our policy instruments to make sure that it's equitable distribution, but come in as the private sector and invest and run the show. Because a government doesn't have to worry about running the business if they can't do it. And it has been proven that they are struggling to run businesses in a business-like format. So as a principle, we as a private sector are willing to run these assets as a private sector for public good. Internally, the transition on how we big support small, it's going to be a transition, because remember, the first thing is that companies are going to focus on generation for sustainability. So you first want to keep your own lights on before you can keep the lights on of your stakeholders. So over time, in the gradual transition, 100 megawatt self-generation can come up, but I'm going to put it out first for my business and then support my immediate community and my service providers. But I think if we want to really be quick on how we can support more people at the same time, let us open the conversation. Let us take what's good out of the private sector and make sure that we use government policy instruments to make sure that private sector runs these assets for public good. And we've made that commitment. Unfortunately, there's still some doubt about whether the private sector can run the show, but we are putting up our hands to say there's no need for us to be stuck in regulation when we have such deep problems. There's no point of having rules that are not serving public. If we are supposed to put in our money as the private sector and put in our capabilities, we are willing to do that, and we're willing to be held publicly accountable so that we don't produce this and we don't privatize these assets in the way that people are afraid of. Because if government has the policy instruments to oversee the private sector, we pay taxes, we play by the rules. Bring the responsibility to us. Let us put in the capital, let us put in the skills, and we think we'll be more accountable for the public good of energy stability.
Mtho Xulu, thank you so much. Really interesting to chat to you. Mtho, of course, is president of the SA Chamber of Commerce and Industry. Thanks for your time this evening.